In 1947, when the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists introduced its doomsday clock, it was set at a symbolic 7 minutes to midnight. It is currently at 90 seconds. In the gloom that now pervades so much news and entertainment, even that seems hopeful. News isn't just bad these days, it tends to be genuinely apocalyptic. War, plague, famine, crime, death is so busy it doesn't come for us individually anymore, it sweeps us up en masse. The media famously make things sound even worse than they are. TV weather ballyhoos each approaching rainstorm as a biblical flood, each new snow as the blizzard of the century. If you pay attention, the sky is perpetually falling. Every new plague, from AIDS to monkeypox to Zika, is forecast to be the one that will wipe out all humanity. And what was the worldwide COVID shutdown but a post-apocalyptic movie in real life? All the empty streets lacked was Charlton Heston in his convertible. Some of us endured and survived COVID, but some of us embraced it as yet another doomsday cult, and they're going to COVID church still. Popular culture is obsessed with apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic scenarios. Science fiction, once fecklessly optimistic about the future, has been dominated by dystopian visions for some time. Zombie hordes and robot armies march across our movies, TV shows, and games. Alien invaders annihilate our cities. AI realizes we're inferior and annihilates us all. Killer asteroids end us all. Angels and demons use us as cannon fodder in their eternal battle. We're collateral damage to superheroes and their villains. Godzilla has been enjoying an excellent comeback. In The Happening, even the wind in the willows turned genocidal. Why? Maybe we're unconsciously, but very publicly, acknowledging the fact that the apocalypse isn't coming, it already happened. The world ended in the 20th century. This is the world after the end of the world. Can there be any question that the 20th century was the lowest point in recorded history? Or, as Al Pacino's Satan exulted in the 1997 Devil's Advocate, who in their right mind could possibly deny the 20th century was entirely mine? It began with the concentration camps and scorched earth of the Boer War and went out with genocide in Rwanda and the Balkans. It was a century of global destruction on a scale never before dreamed of, let alone seen. A century of atrocities, a century of savages. The century that killed more people than were alive when Jesus walked the earth, and brutalized many millions more. The century when the terms genocide, ethnic cleansing, apartheid, gulag, crimes against humanity, totalitarianism, fascism, mutually assured destruction, nuclear winter, and Orwellian were all coined. The numbers don't tell the whole story, but they are appalling. The Great War left at least 50 million people dead or maimed, and large swaths of Europe in desolate ruin. It also cleared the way for the barbarian cults of Nazism, fascism, and communism. Meanwhile, the Ottomans were massacring 1.5 million Armenians. The Great War was followed directly by the Great Influenza Pandemic, which killed up to 40 million more people. Stalin starved millions of his own people to death and killed millions more in his prisons and gulag camps. World War II killed at least 65 million more humans, including some 27 million in the Soviet Union alone, plus an estimated 3 million who starved to death in India when the British padlocked grain supplies to keep them from the Japanese. With that war came the techno-barbarism of the death camps the firestorm, and the atomic bomb. The bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were relatively trivial events in terms of the numbers slaughtered, but those boiling fireballs couldn't have been more apt symbols for the end times. Mao massacred an estimated 45 million in his Great Leap Forward in the 50s. Pol Pot murdered as many as 2 million people in Kampuchea in the 70s. Some 3 million people were slaughtered in Bangladesh in that decade. At the end of the century, at least 100,000 died in the vicious ethnic war in the Balkans, while in Rwanda, Hutu were hacking 800,000 Tutsis to pieces. And on, atrocity after atrocity, millions of corpses piled on millions of corpses. The majority were non-combatants, collateral damage. Humans had always recognized our capacity for mistreating one another in the vilest ways. But this was a global, species-wide, 100 years of holocaust. Along with those hundreds of millions of humans, the 20th century arguably killed something else, the dream of progress and hope for the future. Since the Enlightenment, optimists had always been able to point to the steady increases in scientific knowledge, technological innovation, and humane culture as evolutionary trends leading inexorably to the perfection of the human race. In the barbaric 20th century, those hopes were dashed. Already by the 1930s, people were beginning to speak of the myth of progress. Writing of H.G. Wells, the early 20th century's most prolific and influential prophet of progress, George Orwell pointed out that, quote, unfortunately, the equation of science with common sense does not really hold good. He cited the airplane, which was looked forward to as a civilizing influence, but in practice has hardly been used except for dropping bombs. The most modern nation in Orwell's time, Nazi Germany, put science and technology, quote, in the service of ideas appropriate to the Stone Age. By the end of World War II, even Wells was moaning, quote, a series of events has forced upon the intelligent observer the realization that the human story has already come to an end, and that Homo sapiens, as he has been pleased to call himself, is in his present form played out. When even H.G. Wells had declared humanity played out, maybe the atomic scientists should have started their doomsday clock at some point after midnight. Is it any wonder we still can't consciously process the enormous horror of it all? Yet it haunts us. We sublimate. What is the zombie apocalypse but a distorted reflection of the 20th century's emaciated hundreds of millions, whose memory we prefer not to face openly? Maybe we fear the walking dead because we know we are the walking dead. What are alien invaders and robot armies if not funhouse reminders of the high-tech barbarians we became? If Godzilla is obviously a metaphor for nuclear destruction, who is Thanos but a Marvel comic book echo of all the last century's genocidal monsters? Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot. In the era of Darwin, Freud, and the young H.G. Wells, it was common to see humanity as steadily marching forward to an ever brighter future. Then we spent a century demoralizing and disabusing ourselves of that notion over and over. Now we wander in a postmodern, post-apocalyptic fog like shades of the dead in Hades. Besides Wells, a few other visionaries have tried to set us straight. Johnny Rotten told us in 1977 that there was no future. But it was Sun Ra in 1972 who put it most straightforwardly. It's after the end of the world. Don't you know that yet? Yes, we do, but we still can't quite face it.